Hey everybody, I'm Atticus and welcome to Greenville Glides here. I'm going to give you a demonstration as to how the Segways work. Alright? So first things first, first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to learn how to get on and off the Segway. If you saw the end of the video that said never let go of your Segway, it's always rolling forward when it's in balance mode. All right, here we are at Williamson Evans Studios. This was a recording studio. Now it's primarily used for TV, radio commercials, but James Brown recorded an album here, Godfather of Soul. Marshall Tucker Band from Spartanburg. Just learned the other day that it's there's no Marshall Tucker in the actual band. Found that out. They played in Greer. Some of the commercials that have been filmed here. If you go into any Spink's gas station here in the upstate of South Carolina, you'll hear my friend John Oliver. I'm on in for a cup of coffee. That guy, that's all recorded here. A lot of the Cliffs communities. Tiger Woods is recorded here. Roger Staubach has been here. One time Mr. Evans stepped out and we were like, hey, who's some other famous people who've been here? He's like, who's that Cajun guy who sings? And some lady goes, Harry Connick Jr. Oh yeah, that's right. He hasn't recorded here, but he's been here. So he's from like New Orleans. Anyway, so little tucked away gem here in the little back alley of Greenville here. Now, these statues represent the Sterling School. The Sterling School was the first all-black school in Greenville. It was founded in the late 1800s. A Reverend Minus was his name. And then the school was actually named after a white lady who was in the Underground Railroad movement. They named it after her. It featured prominently in the Civil Rights era. And its most famous graduate is Jesse Jackson.
Kevin Bacon took a picture of himself in front of here.
Oh, you saw? Yeah, I heard he was. Yeah, because the Bacon brothers were here.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the Il Porcellino, the Young Friends of Florence. A kid from Christchurch went over to Italy, fell in love with the original wild boar in Florence, and wanted to make sure that a copy was brought back here. So they set this up in, I think, 2011. And there's also a copy of it in Munich. I've seen both of the the original and the one in Munich. You can see down there, Pietro Tacca was the original founder of Taco Bell. Kidding. I'll edit that out. Our tours are about 75% fact, and the rest is all fiction. Especially the more out of town you are, the less factual they are. All right. Alright, so guys, this is the heart of downtown Greenville. Just imagine about 250 years ago, this place was Cherokee Indian hunting grounds, okay? In 1763, a settler from up north, his name was Richard Paris, he came down here, and his goal was to establish a trading post with the north and the south. Now, no white man was allowed to own any land here. The Cherokee had that rule. He ended up living with the Cherokee for a while, and actually ended up having a son with a Cherokee woman. His son's name was George. Now, if you look up Richard Paris on Wikipedia, you see he was kind of a wheeler dealer. So the first thing he did is, as soon as George bought the land, he turned around like 5 minutes later and bought it off of George. And so therefore, he was able to buy up all the land down here. He bought up over 100,000 acres. If you look across the street back there, that building with the green shutters, that's the site of his original house. Now, during the Revolutionary War, both sides on the war, the British and the Revolutionary soldiers, were both trying to get in good with him so that they could get the Cherokee fighting for them, get them on their side. He had to pick sides. He ended up siding with the Redcoats. The Revolutionary soldiers managed to nab him and haul him down to Charleston. They put him in jail for about 9 months down there, and then kind of as a little courtesy reminder to say, hey, you know, you're kind of a shyster, we don't like you. They burned his house down. And he came back, saw his house was burned to the ground, gathered up his family, went to the Bahamas, became a farmer, and never came back here. Now, after the Revolutionary War, the Cherokee, of course, lost their land rights. And they began to migrate towards Oklahoma, what's known as the Trail of Tears. Now, in the middle of the 19th century, as Greenville began to settle, people began to settle here. There were, of course, numerous industries that began to develop. Cotton was big, so textile mills. We're going to cross, when we cross over the Reedy River Bridge, you'll see the Camperdown Mill further up used the Reedy River for its power. So a lot of textile mills around here, also a lot of tobacco. Greenville was founded in 1831, and if you look across the street right over there, that guy sitting over there under the trees, that's Vardry MacBee. He's the father of Greenville, and Vardry MacBee was a kind of a real visionary. Among other things, he realized that the railroads needed to run through here if we were going to export the tobacco and all of the textile products. The other thing he did, which was kind of forward-thinking, very ecumenical at the time, is he said he was a philanthropist. So he put up the money for 5 key churches in downtown Greenville. He put up the money for First Downtown Baptist Church, St. Mary's Catholic Church, First Presbyterian, Buncombe Street Methodist over there, and then across Church Street is Christ Church. And he's actually buried there. I once took a Segway tour there. We looked for his grave, couldn't find it. Thought it would be the biggest one. It's a really cool churchyard. If you ever get a chance to go over there, go check it out. It's a beautiful churchyard. The cool thing about it is if you look at Greenville from an aerial point of view, all those churches form the arms and legs of a cross. So that's kind of his contribution to religion, saying, hey, if we're going to build a city, people are going to want to worship. That's how he got a bunch of people to come down here. Now, moving forward, back to where Richard Paris's house was over there, that is an old cigar factory with the green shutters. So as we go down towards the west end, you're going to see a lot of these historical markers that are built right into the sidewalk. They're very colorful. They have a lot of information. We'll stop and take a look at some of those. One of them talks about the cigar factory at the turn of the century, like 1906, 1907. There are about 400 girls working there, producing in total about 1 million cigars a month. And they each earned about $60 a month, just to give you an idea what the wages were back then. And you guys can step out of the sun if you want. Moving forward, further forward into the 20th century, this building here, the old Chamber of Commerce building. You can see the Roman numerals that says it was erected in 1924. So this is 2014, so it's a 90-year-old building, indicative of a really classic style of that area. It looks really cool lit up at night too. So now if you look up at the top there, you got the copper roof up there. Sometimes when the sun is just right and the clouds are right, you got a nice little ring around it, like you got a ring around the moon. So that was 1924. Now this guy here with his back to us, on the top hat, that's Joel Poinsett. And Joel Poinsett was an ambassador to Mexico. He was also the war secretary, kind of a contemporary of Vardru MacBee's. He came down here from the north and settled down here. In his many travels, though, he discovered this botanical you see down here, right? Right here. Any clues what it might be?
Poinsettia.
Poinsettia, correct. Unlike the group a while back said marijuana. No, sorry. They gave me some other interesting responses, which we'll talk about when we go further on. Now, let's look over here. This building here is the Poinsett Hotel. It was completed in 1925, and during that really dark and depressing era in American history known as Prohibition, where you weren't allowed to drink any alcohol, they actually had a room in the basement, a speakeasy called the Red Room, all right? And it was called the Red Room because it was all painted in red, all right? And then over time, this evolved from a hotel into a hospital, an orphanage, a mental institution, old folks home. It really began to become really run down. And but in like the mid 80s, late 80s, they began a huge renovation project. The guy yesterday told me, hey, this did you know that I think it's the Francis Marion Hotel in Charleston is they modeled this after that, but they wanted to make it even fancier. So they really did it up nicely. And then the Poinsett took it over in about 2000. Huge renovation project. If you look up the roof, you see the brickwork up there is completely redone. Now, another cool little tidbit is the movie Leatherheads, George Clooney's greatest movie ever, right? I'm sure you've watched it dozens of, no, it's not, it didn't do well in the box office. It's all about football in the 1920s. Well, a lot of it was filmed in the upstate of South Carolina. So the whole cast and crew, George Clooney, Renee Zellweger, and crew, they stayed here. And Clooney has a scene where he's like in the courtyard, and he goes down Court Street right over there where that truck is going. Great, so now what we're going to do is we're going to head past the Peace Center, and we're going to go check out the old cigar warehouse where the cigars that were manufactured here were stored before they were put on trains. All right. This is the Old Cigar Warehouse. We used to ride our Segways over here, but then they asked us not to go on their property. So I started going across the street, but we're here just to have a closer look at it. But when I was across the street, you'll notice something about the building, and I think what we'll do is we'll see it from that side so you get what I'm saying. You're not going to see it here. I never noticed it on this side, but when I started going on that side of the street, something struck me about the building. And when you look at it from the front, it kind of reminds you of another famous building. You can't see it from here, you only see it from there, so I'm kind of glad we started going over there. It kind of looks like the Alamo. In fact, so I brought a tour. Almost everybody, I say, what does it remind you of? The Alamo. Well, we had a tour there a little bit slow the other day, and so I'm like, I started giving hints. I'm like, Texas? No. San Antonio? No. Ozzy Osbourne peed on it, went to jail for it? Nope. And then they got it, Alamo. So it's like, all right. But the cool thing here is this sign. It's an original sign. This building is from 1882, as you see the Old Cigar Warehouse. But this sign is from the early 1900s. And the story about it is that Coca-Cola says delicious and refreshing, and on the other side of that brick wall you see 5 cents. Now the story of the 5 cents is interesting because originally Coke was only sold, at restaurants and soda shops and all that. But in 1899, a couple of attorneys said, hey, why don't we go see if we can get the bottling rights for Coke? Of course, Coke is in Atlanta, right? So they went and they talked to the president of Coke. The president of Coke got a little nervous with these two attorneys in his office, so he apparently signed off on this deal really fast and wanted to get them out of the office. Now, on one of my tours, I started telling lawyer jokes, and one lady said, yeah, my husband's a lawyer, watch out, and I just couldn't stop myself, and I paid the price later at the tip jar. Really, she was not too happy with me. But anyway, these lawyers got the bottling rights, the raw materials, and they walked out of there with a contract that basically allowed them to bottle Coke, got all the raw materials, the syrup and all, for a fixed price with no end in sight, no end to the contract. Now Coke soon realized its mistake. They realized, hey, these guys, we weren't allowed to tell them what price to put on their bottles. So they could sell it for whatever they wanted to, and Coke would be cut out of the margin. So they said, we got to go for volume to make up a lot, for the loss of margin. So what they did is they started putting up signs all around the country saying, drink Coca-Cola 5 cents. So they basically brainwashed people into saying, bottle of Coke has to be 5 cents. So the bottlers had a hard time trying to sell it for more than that. Another thing that helped, by the way, this sign, this 5 cent sign, I've had 2 separate tours where people from Schenectady, New York, and they corrected me when I said Schenectady. No, I learned how to say it properly now. So 2 people from Schenectady said, yeah, we've seen this exact same sign in Schenectady. So it was all around the country. They kind of brainwashed everybody into, Coke is 5 cents. Well, the other thing that helped them out was the original vending machines could only take a single coin, so a nickel. But eventually, when prices had to go up, apparently when they tried it with the vending machine, of course going to a dime, apparently there were riots. People rioted, like, no, we can't do that. So Coke's like, well, let's see. So they went to the U.S. Treasury Department and they said, let's see, guys, can you mint us like a 7.5 cent coin or something like that? Of course, we being Americans, we're not that great at math, so thank goodness we didn't end up with the 7.5 cent coin and trying to make change with that. But Coke stayed at 5 cents a bottle for the longest time, almost 70 years, into the early 50s. My father-in-law came down here one time. He's like, yeah, I remember, back in the early 50s, a bottle of Coke for 5 cents. That's how they became #1 in the world. Eventually, the contract, they had to buy back the contract for many, 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 many millions of dollars. I don't know the exact amount. I'll have to look it up sometime. But that's the story of the Old Cigar Warehouse. The cigars were stored here, and you see the railroad track back there. Of course, it's no passenger trains, just freight trains. And once in a blue moon, we'll actually see a train go by. It's pretty cool. Here we are at Fluor Field. Fluor is a big engineering firm, offices here in Greenville and Irving, Texas. Fluor Field is where the Greenville Drive plays. The Drive, of course, is named after BMW. And the Drive is the farm team for Boston. So the Boston Red Sox farm team is here. This field is kind of shaped like Fenway Park. In fact, we have our own green monster over there, right? It's the left field wall over there. Now it's 7 feet shorter than the one in Boston, but just like in Boston, they have a little guy behind there that's changing out the scores. I mean, I don't know if he's little, but you kind of see him peeking behind there. Have you guys seen any games here?
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah. These bricks here are all taken from repurposed bricks from all the various textile mills that were around here. You know, huge textile industry. They repurposed the bricks when they built the park in 2006. Now, a couple tours ago, I had a guy said, yeah, I had lunch with the manager of the Greenville Drive. It was really cool. We started talking about what, you know, all the various events and games. And he said, what's the biggest event? What's the biggest game you have here? Of course, it's Clemson, Carolina plays one of their triple headers here. I was here about 2 months ago. It was all red shirts and orange shirts. It was a lot of fun. We could barely fit our way through there. But he goes, well, why is that your biggest game? And he said, well, it's the only game that people care about what the outcome is. Now, that's not true. Obviously, there's some diehard sports fans. But for me, like, I come here with my kids and all, and it's like, oh my gosh, I spent 40 bucks on popcorn, peanuts, beer, ice cream, and all. That's just for me. And then for my kids, it's like, you know, so no, I'm kidding. But it's a lot of fun. So great park, great fun. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go over here. So this is Shoeless Joe Jackson here, our hometown baseball hero. He was born in 1888, grew up in Pickens County, and at a very young age he was already working in the textile mills. So like 7 or 8 years old, he was pushing a broom in a textile mill. So among other things, he never went to school, never learned to read or write, and that comes into play a little bit later. But each of the textile mills, and again, you know, these bricks from the various textile mills, all of the textile mills had their own baseball team. It was called the Textile League. And so each textile mill would get together on weekends and they would play against each other in the Textile League. And it was the era of the dead ball. The ball was about the same size as our current, you know, baseball, but it was a lot softer. And also the outfield was further out. So to hit a home run required a lot of power. So Shoeless Joe Jackson was quite the hitter. In fact, he was a contemporary of Babe Ruth's. And Babe Ruth said, man, this is the greatest natural hitter I've ever seen play. Babe Ruth actually copied some of his hitting style. So Shoeless Joe Jackson was really, really good. And when he would go play in the textile leagues, he had a bunch of brothers and sisters. So what would happen is every time he went up to bat, whenever he hit a home run, his brothers and sisters would go past the hat for tips. He actually collected more money in tips on weekends playing in the baseball games than he would all week pushing a broom in the textile mills. So he was really good. He played for the minors. He ended up playing for 3 different major league teams. Now, in 1917, he was playing for the White Sox, and the White Sox went to the World Series, and the owner, Comiskey, walked into the locker room apparently just before the game and said, all right, boys, you know, you win this game for me, I'm going to make it worth your while. You're going to love it. It's going to be awesome. And so they're like, yeah, let's do it, guys. So what they did, they went won the World Series. Afterwards, Comiskey walks into the locker room, says, "Here you go." He gave him a case of cheap champagne. So a bunch of players were like, "Are you serious?" You know. And as a result, when they made it to the 1919 World Series 2 years later, a bunch of players kind of had a little grudge. They're like, "Hey, let's get back at Comiskey." So some of the players got into cahoots with each other and said, "Let's throw the game." And apparently they would like say, "Okay, you know, let's drop the ball out in the outfield," and stuff like that. And there were 8 players who were accused of throwing the game, accused of each being offered $5,000 to throw the game. Unfortunately, Shoeless Joe Jackson was one of them. He even signed an admission of guilt. But remember, he didn't know how to read or write, so that he probably had no clue what he was signing. And there's the legend goes that a little kid saw him walking into court saying, "Say it ain't so, Joe," right? Say it ain't so. So that's where you get the "say it ain't so, Joe." Now, he swore the rest of his life he had nothing to do with throwing the game. You know, they're all told drop balls and stuff like that. But he actually got a home run. He got the only home run of that for Chicago. He also got people out at the plate. He was an amazing, he played left field, you know, and he could get people all the way out from the outfield, get them out at home plate. So he swore up and down, had nothing to do with it. But they wanted to make an example of these 8 players to say, "Hey, we're a clean league. We don't involve ourselves with the mob." So they let these 8 players go. They were never allowed to play Major League Baseball again. And Shoeless Joe was heartbroken. He tried to sneak back into games and play professionally again, but it just wouldn't work out because he had a unique characteristic. He batted left-handed, but he threw right-handed. So he was easy to spot because of that. That wasn't very common back in the days, switch hitting and all that. So he was easy to spot. So he moved back to Greenville, and he and his wife, they opened up a liquor store to support themselves. And we're going to go over to the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum. And in the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum, they actually have the doors of the liquor store. So it's pretty cool. So we're going to head across the street there to take a look at it, because unfortunately we have a beer truck in the way. So this is actually the Shoeless Joe Jackson Museum. It's the house that he lived in, and it was moved across town. It was about 3 miles away. They moved it across town in 2006 when they opened the ballpark. It's a really cool museum. It's only open on Saturdays from 10 to 2. So our Saturday tour, we actually go in there, we take a look. It's a lot of fun to go in there. Joe, like I said, moved back to Greenville, and he and his wife lived in this house from 1940 until his death in 1951. He died right there in that corner room. This is the room he died in, 1951. Now, he and his wife, Katie, they never had any children, but the kids would love to come and visit him. So what would happen is they'd come and knock on his door and say, "Hey, can we get your autograph?" And he'd say, "Sure." What he would do is he'd sneak into the kitchen, and walk into the kitchen, have his wife come into the kitchen as well, and she'd sign everything and bring it back out. Remember, he never learned to read or write, right? So they actually have his signature on the wall. Every time he did a signature, somebody had to write a signature for him, and he would like sit there and scrawl it. His signature's so rare. There's a bunch of Hall of Famer signed balls in there, like Joe DiMaggio, Ernie Banks, all that. Bunch of Hall of Famers. Huge display case. I talked to someone in the museum. I said, "Man, that's a valuable collection." They said, "I traded all for one Shoeless Joe Jackson signed ball." Shoeless Joe was an amazing player. I think he still has like the #1 best batting average for a rookie, unbeaten. And then also his lifetime batting average, if you look at the door right here, 356 was his lifetime batting average. That's the 3rd highest lifetime batting average ever. I think Ty Cobbs and someone else had a higher lifetime batting average. Just happened to be his house number. Now this house was brought over here and featured in an episode of Flip This House. So pretty cool little story about Shoeless Joe Jackson. If you get a chance, come in here on Saturdays. It's a really, really cool museum. All right, so this is Funnelicious. It's a little funnel place, funnel cakes, all carnival food, deep fried Kool-Aid, deep fried Oreos, anything deep fried. The reason we stop here is it got really popular, and people come from all over to see this place because it was featured on the Travel Channel's Deep Fried Paradise. Travel Channel has all kinds of something paradise. Well, Deep Fried Paradise feature this. People come from all out of town. It's a fun place to go. Take the kids. I like to joke that it's probably one of those places you only go to once or twice a week. So anyway, but if you love funnel cakes, they honestly have the best funnel cakes. So it's a lot of fun to go here. All right, so this is the Shoeless Joe Jackson statue. We're seeing him from behind here. Remember, I told you he swung left, so you see him swinging through that picture that we saw on the side of the old firehouse over there, which is now the ticket booth. Is the picture that they used for the statue, I believe. Now these bricks here are taken from Comiskey Park. He played for the White Sox. The scandal, of course, when they were kicked out was called the Black Sox scandal. So, but Comiskey Park donated these bricks when it was torn down. Now the story of how he became shoeless, notice he's wearing his shoes here. There was only one incident that happened that caused him to get the nickname. So he was playing in the textile mills, in the textile league, right? He was playing a game, and he had some new cleats. They were really chafing his feet. So he asked to be taken out of the game, and they said, you can't take, we're not going to take you out of the game. So what happened is he said, what the heck? He went up, he was such a good hitter, he hit a home run, hit it out of the park, and took his shoes off, and ran the bases in his socks. And someone saw him and said, "You shoeless son of a gun, what are you doing?" Well, they heard it, and they started saying, "Shoeless son of a gun," and it was written up like in the Greenville News or so. And that's how he got the nickname. The next day there was a headline, Shoeless Joe Jackson. The name stuck with him his whole life from that one incident. He didn't do this all the time, but that's how he became Shoeless Joe Jackson. Joseph Jefferson Jackson. All right, here we are in front of the smartest guy in Greenville. Not me, but this guy right behind me, Dr. Charles Towns. Okay, you'll be a little famous on a YouTube video. Dr. Charles Towns was written up as one of the most influential minds of the last 1,000 years. He's the guy who invented the mazer, which evolved into the laser. He graduated from Furman in 1935. He won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1964. He got the idea for the laser while sitting on a park bench in Washington, D.C. So if you look at these 3 park benches right here, they're all park benches from the city of Washington, D.C. If you look over here, he's sitting here writing down his idea, reached in his pocket, grabbed an envelope, unfolded it, and started writing the formula for the laser right here. Now, apparently at night, somebody told me, if you look here, this lights up a little bit, but you only see it in the dark. All right? And now he likes to wear Argyle socks. He's actually still alive, was born in 1915, which makes him about 98 years old right now. He's still alive, I believe lives out in California. Smartest guy from Greenville. All right, so obviously the falls, this is the most beautiful part of our tour, my favorite part of the tour. And if you look over there, you see this suspension bridge. There used to be a road that crossed over here. They put a suspension bridge in here. There are also some houses under the bridge over there. Mayor Knox White exercised eminent domain and got rid of some of the houses, but there ended up being a legal battle. So a guy yesterday was involved in a lot of building projects here, and he said, those stairs over there, the jury was going to award $600,000, which was the price of the house. They said, oh, let's tenfold that. So those are $6 million stairs over by High Cotton over there. So I found that out the other day. This suspension bridge is a totally unique suspension bridge. It's like the only kind, it was the first of its kind being suspended on one side like that. But you see the falls, they're gorgeous. On a rainy day, this is like double the volume. They had the Duck Derby recently. Apparently they've had some guy who's actually gone over the falls like 24 times in a row in a kayak one time, like a couple years ago. Way off in the distance under the bridge, you can kind of see some color through the foliage. They're setting up for Shakespeare in the park. I've never been to one, but I want to go. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So. Segway. I know in my heart they think I'm white and nerdy. Think I'm just too white and nerdy. Think I'm just too white and nerdy. Can't you see I'm white and nerdy? Look at me, I'm white and nerdy.